Hold on one sec. Okay. Good to go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. My name is Councillor Dale Hendrickson, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. Councillors Donna Clark and Kieran Van Sweden are also in attendance and will be participating. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You are also reminded to note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout? Can members of the review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphones when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of the reviews. This meeting has been convened in response to 3 requests for review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the council's scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. Members of the local review body, I will now ask Lindsay McBain, the assistant clerk, to outline the procedures to be followed in the conduct of this meeting. Mrs. McBain.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, if you could also just switch your microphone on, please. Sorry, your camera. I'll just read out the statement now. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replaced that with the local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner stated that reviews by LRBs should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to discuss the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mrs. McBain, sorry, I'm jumping ahead slightly there. Turning to consideration of the first review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the erection of a single-storey extension, formation of dormer, installation of replacement windows and door to the rear, and the formation of roof lights to the front at 125 Blenheim Place, to planning application 220604/DPP. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Miss Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development. In effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Over to you, Ms. Green.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is a review into single-story extension, dormer replacement windows and formation of roof lights at 125 Blenheim Place. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the case officer. The applicant has indicated on the notice of review that no new matters have been raised in the review submissions. And in terms of procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll proceed to provide some background information before handing back to you, convener. So this is the site location plan, and the site's located on the western side of Blenheim Place, backs onto the rear lane which runs between and parallel to Blenheim Place and Fountain Hall Road. And this is just taken from Google. There's the application premises there with the rear lane, Blenheim Place to the front. So you can see the existing rear extension and then garages at the end on the lane. It's a 3D image taken from Google. So this is the rear of the application premises. See the existing dormer there and the existing extension. And just might want to note the neighbours and other properties in the surrounding area. Let's move on to the front elevation taken from street view again. You can just see the existing dormers on the roof there. And now this is from the lane. So that's the application premises with the existing dormer. You can see the dormers on the neighbouring houses as well. And the surrounding area is characterised by properties of similar architectural character. This is the site plan. So the planning application seeks permission for a single-storey extension, which projects out from the existing sort of rear extension there. The dormer on the rear roof slope can be seen there. And the proposal also includes the 2 new roof lights. There's an existing roof light in that position. That would be installed, a larger roof light, and then this one as well. So moving on to the floor plans. You can just see the proposed extension there on the floor plans. So in terms of size, it would be extended out by 0.6 metres along a length of 3.8 metres, and it would have a flat roof and would contain full height glazing, which we'll see on the elevation in a moment. First and second floor plans. So on the second floor plan, you can see the existing dormer just there, which is just over 1 metre in width, and that would be removed, and then the box dormer installed, and that would be a width of 6.4 metres. And this is showing the cross section through the house with the proposed dormer and the extension at ground floor level That's the dormer there, and then the elevation of the rear extension. And then the rear elevation. So you can see that the existing dormer is there, and then it'll be replaced with the box dormer. And the report notes that it would be positioned 850 millimetres from the adjoining dwelling, 650 millimetres from the granite tabling, and 310 millimetres from the roof ridge. Glazing would be located at either end of the dormer, and approximately a 1.5 wide slated solid panel would exist in between. And the windows to the rear would be replaced. One of these is an existing timber sash and case, and that's this window here. So the windows on the first floor would be replaced with white UPVC sash and case windows. And that's the elevation to the front, as proposed with the roof lights and as existing. So it's proposed to install a 1.34 metre by 0.98 metre roof light and a 0.78 by 0.98 roof light, and both of these roof lights would be recessed into the roof slope and will contain central glazing bars, so conservation style roof lights. And these are images as proposed, submitted by the applicant, showing the rear extension and then the proposed dormer, and it's showing the neighbouring dormer as well. Then the next drawing just shows the detail of the roof lights, and the text in red that you can't read on there confirms that the roof light would project no more than 100 mm from the face of the slates. So in terms of consultations, there were no comments from the Queen's Cross and Hull Law Community Council. No representations. The reasons for refusal, which are stated in full in the report of handling in the agenda and on the website, the key points were that the large roof light proposed to the front would be incompatible in scale and location on this property, that the proposed rear dormer results in the loss of a traditional dormer and creates a considerable mass on the roof, and that there are therefore tensions with the householder design guide and Historic Environment Scotland's managing change guidance on roofs. There's a further point made that with the exception of the adjoining property, which doesn't create a precedent because it was approved prior to the current guidance, other alterations in the area are designed with consideration for the context. That the features proposed don't preserve the character of the conservation area, and that they're therefore contrary to the relevant policies in the adopted and proposed local development plans, the householder design guide supplementary guidance, and the windows supplementary guidance, the Historic Environment Scotland's managing change guidance, and then the Historic Environment Policy for Scotland and Scottish Planning Policy. Both of those last two sort of relate to character of conservation areas and historic buildings. So in terms of the applicant's case, it stated that aspects of the application are deemed acceptable by the planning authority, and those are the single-storey extension, the roof lights to the rear, and the replacement windows. That the proposed roof light to the front is of recessed conservation style with vertical bars, and that this is as advised in the guidance and replicates the style of typical Victorian lights over stairwells, and also that many roofs in the area have 3 roof lights. In terms of the rear dormer, the applicant states that the existing dormer isn't thought to be original and that the proportions of the neighbouring dormer have been replicated, and that the current proposal wouldn't set a precedent, that the dormer complies with the design guide in terms of the distances from the edge of the roof, etc., that I mentioned earlier, and that a substantial area of the main roof would remain. Also stated is that the rear roof cannot be seen from the public street and that there's quite a restricted view from the rear lane. The applicant makes reference to several other cases in the area. There's a refusal at 57 Blenheim Place, which came to LRB earlier this year, and the applicant states that this is dissimilar because of the existing situation at 57 Blenheim Place. There's also reference made to several other dormers in the area, so 48 and 50 Fountain Hall Road, 28 and 30 Fountain Hall Road, a dormer on the front elevation on Blenheim Place, and there's also recent approval of a dormer at 56 Fountain Hall Road. You might remember that one was referred to in the 57 Blenheim Place case, and that was an approval of a rear dormer where there wasn't an existing dormer on the roof. 59 Deswood Place, that was a previous LRB case of dormers. So the final point made by the applicant was the window frame at the first floor to the rear is in a poor state of repair and replacement would reduce energy use. That's the sash and case window, the timber sash and case window. They state that that is the only sash and case window in the elevation, with the other windows being of a sort of poorer quality in UPVC, and these would all be replaced, which would create uniformity. So at that point, I'll hand back to you, convener, for discussion of how you wish to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit undertaken. The applicant has stated that no further procedure is needed before determination. I'd just like to say that I feel that I do have enough information to make a determination on this case. Councillor Clark, could you please state if you have sufficient information to take a decision, and if you do not feel any further procedures are required, please state for the minutes the reason why.
I feel I've got enough information given to me here to make my decision.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Van Sweden, could you please state if you have sufficient information to take a decision, and if you do not feel any further procedures are required, please state for the minutes the reason why.
Convener, I do feel I have sufficient information to make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. As members feel they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review. Over to you, Ms. Green, again.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen again. Right, so just move on to the policies now. So the site lies within an area zoned under Residential Areas Policy H1, and this policy states that residential development is acceptable in principle in these areas, subject to various criteria. The most relevant one in this case is the second criteria about whether the proposal has an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area. It doesn't involve loss of open space. And in terms of criteria 4, there's a couple of supplementary guidances that are relevant. One of those is the Householder Design Guide, and the second one is the Replacement Windows and Doors Guidance. That latter guidance on windows and doors states that original timber sash and case windows should only be replaced where they are beyond repair. And the Householder Guide, well, that includes a rule of thumb in terms of site coverage, which this proposal doesn't contravene. And it also contains guidance on dormers, which I'll move on to in a moment. So this is the policy on the historic environment, which states that proposals should preserve the character of conservation areas. And in that regard, it advocates for high quality design. The design policy D1, and it's important to take into account the context, in this case, the conservation area, and the relationship of the site to public views. So in terms of the Householder Development Guide, this is from the sort of general guidance in there, which also relates to dormers as well as extensions. And it talks about architectural compatibility with the original house and surrounding area. Proposals shouldn't dominate or overwhelm. There isn't an adverse impact on privacy, daylight and amenity in this case. And it just states that approvals predating the guidance don't represent a precedent. In terms of dormers in particular, it states, again, respecting the scale of the building, not dominating, overwhelming or unbalancing original roofs. And then probably the most relevant point is on traditional properties, original dormers must be retained and repaired, and their removal or replacement with larger modern dormers won't be permitted. Continuing with the Householder Guide, this is the guidance for the relationship of dormers to the roof itself, and the proposed dormer would actually comply with these elements of the guidance. National policy, Scottish planning policy, proposals in conservation areas should preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation areas. And the Historic Environment Scotland Managing Change Guidance, that sort of emphasises the importance of roofs as elements that define character of historic buildings. And it also reiterates the point in the Householder Guide about early historic dormers being retained. So the site lies within the Albine Place and Rubislaw conservation area, and that's showing the site within the wider conservation area, the red area there. So in terms of evaluation, primacy of the development plan and the Planning Act requires all applications to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with careful assessment and each application treated on its merits. So in this case, the relevant points are: does the proposal comply with the tests set out in the residential areas policy, which is the zoning policy, including the householder guide with its guidance on dormers? And similarly, the Historic Environment Scotland Managing Change guidance, and in terms of the impact on the conservation area. Consideration for the design of the various elements of the proposal, and overall, does it comply with the development plan, or are there other material considerations which would weigh against that? So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Are there any questions from Ms. Green? No. I have a, sorry, screen just moved there. I have a couple of questions. Looking at some of the the application is quite a wide-ranging application, but we actually, so for example, the extension to the rear and the replacement of the windows and the windows on the skylights and the dormer, but we have to take it as a whole. We can't actually just pick and choose. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. And the just seeking clarification on the dormer on the building next door. That doesn't set a precedent at all.
No, the guidance states that approvals granted prior to the guidance, so prior to 2009, I think it was, don't set a precedent.
And you mentioned in your presentation that generally within the area that's the, if we could go back to look at the Google Earth slide, if that would be possible.
Yeah. I mean, I can just go on to Google Earth and look a bit more widely if you like.
That would be very helpful. Thank you, Ms. Green.
Sorry, sharing the wrong slide. It's not showing me what they are, so I'm kind of guessing. Right, that's it. So that's the application property. Application property there, and then can look along. That's the row that back onto it.
Okay. Okay.
Is there anywhere?
No, thank you, Ms. Green. I take it that the ones that actually have dormers, flat roof dormers in the area would have been prior to the new guidance, so they would have been acceptable. But as with the one next door, they don't set a precedent.
There's the one at 57 Fountain Hall, which was granted permission fairly recently, if I can find it. And that the reason for that was that there weren't existing historic dormers on the roof.
Okay.
Obviously, the character of the conservation area would have still been a consideration. think that's that one. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Are there any follow-up questions from Councillor Clark or Councillor Van Sweden? Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. In accordance with the procedure note, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations representing to the case have been considered and taken into account. I will be upholding the refusal. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that the planning application has come as one, because there are certain elements of it which I think do work. However, I do feel that the dormer window under policy H1 does have an impact on the building, and it is not subservient. It is quite a large, impactful dormer. I think that we should, I know there's a bit of a debate about the age of the existing dormer. However, I do think it's important that we actually preserve the environmental, the historic environment of the area, and I do think that it would have an impact on the area. Looking around the area, particularly in that street, most of the existing dormers are still present, and I do feel that it would be out of character in the area. So I would agree with the officer's recommendation to refuse on policy H1. It does have an impact on the local environment. And D4, I'm not actually convinced that it's of a particularly, the dormer is of a particularly merit. I think I've seen efforts where at least the original dormer has been preserved or taken into account in the design. That hasn't happened in this case, so I'm not convinced that I feel that the design is of particularly high quality, so I'll be refusing it on H1 and D4. Councillor Clark, can you please state your decision with respect to the application and state for the minutes the ground for that decision, referring to the planning policy where appropriate?
I too am upholding the refusal. On several issues, the dormer windows on H4, and also the large roof light, which at the front is incompatible in the scale of the building. I'm also concerned, and with the conservation and the historical location, that I do feel it is out of character. And that is my grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Van Sweden, can you please state your decision in respect of the application and state for the minute of the grounds for that decision, referring to planning policy where appropriate?
Yes, actually, I would overturn the officer's decision on this. I note that the rear of Blenheim Place deviates from the street perpendicular to it with regard to the dormers. The dormer, yes, as it's pointed out, is not an original dormer. It seems to be that the default on the back of this street is to have a plain roof. So, you know, in comparison to the street perpendicular to it, the default is to have two dormers at the back of each roof. So it's not the same. And yes, I would replace the sash window. I think in the context when other windows have already been replaced, I think it should be replaced, and that's for that reason. Going to the policies though, So I do not feel that it constitutes overdevelopment. I do not think it has an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area. And I don't see that it has a result of valuable space. The council will protect, going to D4, I think that the design is of high quality, and these would be my reasons for overturning.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. The local review body has therefore agreed by a majority of 2-1 to uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused. Thank you very much. Now turning to the second review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the erection of a first floor extension over the existing garage to the front at 131 Granham Drive, Aberdeen, 220673/DPP. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would again point out that Ms. Green also attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance, because she has not been involved in early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in fact her role will be the neutral one, involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Back to you, Ms. Green. Councillor Clark, could you just switch off your microphone?
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my screen again. Right. Yes, as you've stated, convener, this is a review into a proposed first floor extension over an existing garage at 131 Granham Drive. And the request for review against the refusal under delegated powers was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months from the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant indicated there was no new matters raised in the submissions, and in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that there should be that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll continue to provide some background information before handing back to you again, convener, for you to decide how to proceed. So you can see the house there located on a corner plot, and it's the last house on Granham Drive heading west, and it's located at the edge of a larger development with an area of public open space to the west. And the site is enclosed by a 1.8 metre 5-stone boundary wall, which you'll see in a slide in a moment. That's the overhead aerial photograph from Google as the property there, and that's the garage which sits forward of the house. And that's a 3D image showing the front of the house, open space to the side, and the garage that would be extended. And you can see that the plot's enclosed by a 1.8 metre high 5-stone wall, which you'll just see in the next photograph taken from Street View. So that's the garage that would be extended. And then another shot from Street View taken from the west, looking along Granham Drive, and that's the house there. So the plans as proposed, ground floor would remain as a garage and the upper floor would become a study bedroom. Going through the elevations, this is as proposed from the front, so this has been added to the building, and that's the existing garage there. So it's accessed by doors just in this way at the side. You can see that materials would match the existing house. And that's again showing the proposal. The upper level has been added there to the garage. And side elevation. This is the addition of the upper level. And from the rear, you'd just see part of the extended garage. So these are visualizations prepared by the applicant's agent, and you can see the extension here. And again, from across the public open space, you can see the extension here. So in terms of reasons for refusal, these are stated in full in the report of handling in the agenda. But the key points are the inappropriate design of the house and in terms of the context. So in terms of scale, siting, roof design, massing, they would result in overdevelopment. And there would be an adverse impact on visual amenity of the surrounding area, especially in terms of the open space next to the site. A further reason is that the proposal would overwhelm and dominate the original form and appearance of the dwelling, and that it's not subservient in terms of its height, mass, or scale. And finally, that it's therefore contrary to policies H1 relating to residential areas, D1 to design, and the householder design guide. So moving on to the applicant's case. They state that the house is 2 stories in height, that it fronts onto Granham Drive but has a garage extending forward of the house, which is already a prominent element. That the garage provides a termination at the end of this private road, and it mirrors property at the opposite end, which also has a projection forward of the main house. It states that the character of the houses viewed across the open space to the west, and they are of 2-story buildings behind a masonry wall. Finally, the proposed extension introduces windows to the first floor on all elevations. It mirrors the band course on the front of the house, with the roof also replaced in the same form, so that the finish, colour and pitch of the roof is continued, and the extension is considered to be a sensitive solution. Further points from the applicant in terms of the householder design guide, the front extension criteria and policy H1, it stated that the design fits well with the composition of the drive and other properties, that the windows at first floor level contribute to the street scene. They relate well to the approach at the application property, that all the design features mentioned match the existing house. That there's no change to the building line, it's just an increase in the up to 2 stories, which matches the house itself. It's not a conservation area. 2-story extensions are generally possible in terms of the guidance. There's no increase in footprint, and that there's no unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the area, nor on the open space. So finally, just to mention that there were no comments from the Dainston Community Council and that there were no representations. So I'll hand back to you, convener, to decide how to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on, application. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit undertaken. The applicant has stated that no further procedure is required before determination. I feel that I have enough information on this to proceed. Councillor Clark.
I feel I've enough information to proceed also.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Van Sweden.
Yes, I feel I have sufficient information.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. As members feel they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies in consideration for this review. Back to you, Ms. Green.
Thank you, convener. So turning to the policies, again, it's policy H1 residential areas that the site is zoned under, and you'll be familiar with the criteria within that policy. The principle of residential development is acceptable. So the criteria, does the proposal constitute overdevelopment? And secondly, does it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the area? Third criteria, not so relevant as it doesn't result in the loss of open space. And in terms of the fourth criteria, the householder design guide would be relevant. So moving on to the householder design guide. The general guidance that extensions should be architecturally compatible in design and scale with the house and surrounding area. Two-story extensions to the side may be acceptable in terms of the guidance, subject to the criteria I just mentioned. And front extension should be of a scale and design complementary to the dwelling, with consideration given to the impact on adjacent properties, visual amenity, any building lines, position of adjacent buildings, and any extension should not overwhelm or dominate and should be visually subservient in terms of its height, mass and scale. As also relevant is policy D1 on design, with the emphasis on taking the context into account. So finally, in terms of evaluation, primacy of the development plan, with the determination being in accordance with that, unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and consideration of each application on its merits. So in this case, the main basis for the decision would be the impact on the character and amenity of the area as set out in policy H1 with the additional guidance from the householder design policy. So does the proposal comply with the development plan, and or are there material considerations that would indicate otherwise? Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Green. Any questions? No. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. I take it that the extension doesn't have an impact on light loss or anything on surrounding buildings. I take it we're actually clear on that.
Yes, the case officer didn't consider that those were reasons for refusal, and yeah, that would be the case.
Okay. Would it be possible to go back to just bear with me. Page 84. The ground view, and I don't know if there's one where we actually have.
Just let me find what
yes.
that in the agenda.
Sorry, not page 91 rather.
Sorry, I wasn't using the agenda, but I'll just get that.
Yeah,
up.
thank you.
Oh, the photographs, the visualizations, you mean?
Yes. Unfortunately, the two I want to have a look at are a little bit apart.
Right.
So
Hold on.
page 91 and page 84 are the two that I'm sort of interested in having a look at that. So maybe we could have a look at 84 first.
Oh, right. Sorry, jumping about. Oops.
Thank
That
you.
one.
Yes, that's the first one. It's just to look at the. I just wanted to look at the visual situation at the moment. So basically, we have, looking at that, the houses to the right of the applicant houses mirror they mirror each other. They're both of the same design, so that's why it looks in context. If you get me, it's yes, that one.
That.
Yeah.
With that garage.
Yeah. So they're both of the same design, and that's how they look. Thank you. Now, can we move on to the one which shows the proposed development?
Yeah.
From the similar sort of. It's not quite the same angle, unfortunately. That's the one. So
yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking at it at the moment. It does have a fairly major impact on the view from that side. And is that the number of windows that are proposed? There's just the small windows in the top of the yes, those. That's it. So it's a fairly large area.
You look, I can pull the elevation up as well, so that's helpful. Yeah, that's looks like the visualization is accurate in that. Just seeing a bit more detail in the windows there.
Thank you. Is the change in the roof lines of the current setup? Because there's one view that actually shows the impact on the roof lines, and the design of the building at the moment. The roof lines are in alignment, but the roof lines would actually be that element of the design of the original building would be quite markedly changed. It's.
I mean, looking along the street.
Yeah, page 86. I don't know if that helps.
Let me see what's on page 86. That's the front elevation.
Yes, yes, it is. Sorry, I'm not being very helpful with.
No, it's okay. I'm not. I'm just not using the agenda, so that's why it's. Oops. Sorry, that's the rear.
That's the one. So there is a quite marked change in the alignment of the roof line. Would that be something that we could take into consideration, the sort of change in the roof line? Is that something that we could?
Do you mean the projects above the hipped roof?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the case officer is getting at with the comments on the sort of massing and siting of the building. But yes, you could take into account that the change in the roof line with the hipped roof, and this now sits sort of in front of it. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's exactly. Sorry, I'm not expressing myself too clearly. That's it. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Green. Are there any? Okay. Councillor Clark.
We spoke a bit about someone at the opposite end of the street, like the bookend sort of style. The opposite end would mirror this house. Is it possible to see that on Google Maps? It's just so that I can see relevance to the...
Yes, I'll just share that screen. So it's this house at the opposite end, which, according to the report, was built in that way, but it is 2-storey.
Thank you for that.
So that's the house at the opposite end. So the applicant's saying that that would be a bookend to what would be an extension on top of the garage there.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, my microphone was off there.
Oh.
Councillor Van Seeden, have you any further questions? Thank you very much. Right. I'm in two minds about this one. I think I'm actually minded, having looked at that last image, I'm minded to overturn the officer's recommendations. I am aware that it is quite a large massing. However, seen that it is in context with the other end of the street, I'm happy that it does actually. Sorry, I've just lost my notes here. Yes. Yes. With regards to policies, H1, I don't think it's overdevelopment. It is quite large, but it doesn't. I'm not convinced that it actually affects the surrounding streetscape. The design of it, I'm fine with the design of it, so I'm fine on policy D1. When I first looked at it, I wasn't sure, but I think it's on the yes. With regards to the H1, as I say, I don't think it's overdevelopment. It won't have an impact on any surrounding property. It does have an impact from the the open space next to it, but as it's set quite well back, I'm not quite sure that it would have a major impact on the surrounding environment. So with regards to H1, I don't think it's overdevelopment. It won't have an impact on adjacent property. And with regards to policy D1, I think the design actually fits in well with the rest of the buildings, and it doesn't actually have an impact on any surrounding buildings. So I think on those grounds that with regards to policy H1, I don't consider it overdevelopment, and I don't feel that it's in with regard to policy D1. I think the design is fine. So if that's okay, that's the reasons that I will give. And it, again, with policy H1, it doesn't have an impact on adjacent properties. Thank you. Let's see, bear with me. Councillor Clark, can you please state your decision in respect of the application and state for the minute the grounds for that decision, referring to planning policy where appropriate?
Right, I decided to overturn the decision. My reasons being that, to me, on H1, it is not an overdevelopment. It has no major impact where it's next to open ground. The open ground there is quite a large space. Regarding D1, I think it's fine. I feel it's in context with the street. So these are my reasons for overturning the decision.
Councillor Van Sweden, can you please state your decision in respect of the application and state for the minute the grounds for that decision, referring to planning policy where appropriate?
Yes, I'm in agreement with both of you. I would not uphold the officer's decision on this. I know this area quite well, so I find that the extension is architecturally compatible. I find the design appropriate. I don't find that it overwhelms, and I don't find that it's out of context. So going to policy H1, it does not constitute overdevelopment as far as I can see. It doesn't have an unacceptable impact on the character or amenity of the surrounding area, and it does not result in a loss of valuable or valued areas of space. So these would be my reasons for overturning the officer's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. As the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer, we now need to consider whether any conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. Please note that the decision of the notice of today's meeting will be issued by the applicant or agent after the meeting. Councillor Vance, I have no conditions to be added. Councillor Van Sweden?
No conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
No decisions.
Conditions. Thank you, Councillor Clark. That's it. So the officer's recommendation has been overturned. And we can now move on to, excuse me, my notes have got a wee bit shuffled. Sorry about that. Right, sorry. Been shuffling papers here, so I'm now moving on to the consideration for the third review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the partial change of use of an agricultural field to residential curtilage, erection of a garage and formation of a new access with associated works at Kings Hall House, C128C from junction with Countess Wells Road and North Countess Wells Road to Kingsford Roundabout, planning application 220021 /DPP. We will again hear from the planning advisor, Ms. Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and remind us of the reasons why the application was refused. Excuse me. I would like to again to point out to Ms. Green Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms. Green, if you can now give your presentation.
Thank you, convener. Share my screen again. Okay. So this review, as you stated, convener, relates to an application for the change of use of field to residential, the erection of a garage and the formation of new access with associated works at Kings Hill's house. And all the necessary information was submitted within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. And the applicant has indicated that there is no new matters raised within the submissions. In terms of procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that a site visit is needed in order to see the existing access and the visibility of the site from the surrounding area. So it's not considered by the applicant that the review should proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I will provide some background information on the case and then hand back to you for members to make a decision on how to proceed. So this is the site location plan, and the site lies within the Greenbelt just to the south of the Kingswells roundabout. And the site measures around 2,200 metres squared and includes part of the residential curtilage of Kings Hill House and part of the agricultural fields to its north and south, which fall within the same ownership. And Kings Hill House is a substantial detached dwelling set in a residential curtilage, which contains a detached double garage building, granted planning permission in 2019. And to its west is a stables block, which is located out with the residential curtilage. To the north and south are agricultural fields, some falling within the same ownership. And the plot as existing has 2 vehicular accesses, both providing access and egress onto the road. And the road has been stopped up immediately to the north of the application site, following the opening up of the new road to Countess Wells. So that's the new road. So this is an overhead image, quite an old one, and it just shows the site within context. It's the house there. So the site extends to the north and to the south here. That's the existing garage, existing stable block, and the 2 access points onto the road. And this is the site plan as existing. And the areas are coloured in red are where the change of use would apply from field to residential curtilage. But this is as existing. And as proposed, you can see the garage there. And that's just surface water drainage that's shown at the back there. That's the existing garage and the new access, which would be taken out onto the road here. And this is just showing dry stone walls that would be erected each side of the driveway. And this plan indicates that the driveway would be in stone chippings other than the first 5 metres, which would be in tarmac. So there are 2 previous applications, one for the existing garage, which is shown there in 2019, and the other in 2016 for a triple garage, which is roughly in the area of the garage that's now proposed. and those were both approved. So this plan shows the 4 trees that would be removed for the new access. That tree is proposed to be transplanted, and there's a section of hedging as well to be removed. So I've just added this excerpt from the tree survey report, which shows the trees shaded in purple are those that would be felled. So 13-metre larch, 6-metre sycamore, a 7-metre rowan, a 6-metre cherry, all of category C, which is towards the lower end of the tree quality, the sort of survey criteria, and then this category B tree, which would be transplanted. And the tree survey report also states that were the development to go ahead, the first 15 metres of the driveway would need to be surfaced using a cellular confinement system to protect the root protection areas of the trees that would remain. So turning to the reasons for refusal. These are all in the report of handling in the agenda and set out in full in there, and they are summarised as follows. The proposal would be contrary to the Greenbelt Policy in respect of extending the residential curtilage and creating the access. That consideration should be given to the potential for permitted development that would be allowed if it was a residential curtilage. That there is a visual difference between residential curtilage and agricultural fields in terms of the character of the greenbelt, that is. That the flat roof garage proposed is not of high quality as required by the Greenbelt Policy. That the proposal would not protect or enhance the character of the Greenbelt and would be therefore contrary to Scottish planning policy. A further reason for refusal was the loss of trees and the visual impact of the tree loss, and that the proposal would be thereby contrary also to the policy on trees and woodland and design. For the applicant, the reasons for refusal are set out in full in the applicant's statement, which is in the agenda, but they're summarised as follows. That the proposal does not harm the character of the Greenbelt and therefore doesn't contravene the policy due to it being located within the boundaries of the existing residential development, being small scale, not significantly increasing the intensity of activity, and it would be ancillary to the existing residential use. In terms of design, the applicant states that the proposal demonstrates the 6 qualities of successful places, and that the proposal would comply with policies on transport impact of development, sustainable and active travel, flooding and drainage, and also trees and woodlands in both the adopted and proposed plans. The case is made that this is sustainable development in terms of Scottish planning policy, and that should take precedent, that there are no objections, that the extent of the residential curtilage considered in the report of handling is different from that the applicant considers relevant, that there are benefits of the proposed access, and that's in terms of safety when accessing the site from the south. So at this point, I'll hand back to the convener for the review body to decide whether to proceed with the determination or require further procedure such as a site visit.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I feel that I have sufficient information at the moment to make a determination, and that no further procedures are required. I think all the information is there. Councillor Clark, could you please state if you have sufficient information to take a decision, and if you do not feel this, what further procedures are required? Please state for the minutes the reason why.
I would be asking for a site visit because, as it stated, it differs from noted from the case officer. And I think a site visit would be beneficial.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Van Sweden, could you please state if you have sufficient information to take a decision, and if you do not feel if any further procedures are required, please state for the minutes the reason why.
Convener, I feel that I have sufficient information.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. As I'm just wondering if I could have a bit of guidance here. I'm not. Do we then have to? Is it a majority?
So yes, Chair, just as it's a majority, it's up to you. Well, it's up to the three of you to decide. But Councillor Clark has opted for a site visit, but the other two haven't. So it's up to you to make a decision.
Thank you, Ms. Bain. I was just seeking clarification there. As I feel that the majority of the members on the LRB have sufficient information, we will now proceed and ask Ms. Green to give us the relevant planning policies and other considerations. Back to you, Ms. Green.
Thank you, convener. Just share my screen again. So moving on to Greenbelt Policy, the site's zoned within the Greenbelt in the local development plan. And there's a general presumption against development within the Greenbelt with the following exceptions. And the relevant ones that apply to this proposal are these ones. So whether the proposal is associated with existing activities in the Greenbelt, it can be permitted, but only if all of the criteria noted are met. So the developments within the boundary of the existing activity, its small scale, intensity of activity not significantly increased, and any proposed built construction is ancillary to what exists. And then there's the general part of this policy which states that all proposals for development in the Greenbelt must be of the highest quality in terms of siting, design, scale and design, in terms of their impact on the character of the Greenbelt. And it also talks about impact on landscape, trees, natural heritage. So there are various other policies referred to. Policy D1 on design, which I'll show you a slide on in a moment. The transport impact of development, that policy just states that proposals must manage their transport impact. The policy on trees and woodland, that presumes against the loss of trees that are of value visually and also in terms of their contribution to nature conservation. And the policies in the proposed plan largely reiterate those in the local development plan, the adopted local development plan. So the slide on design policy, so it's important to take into account the context, which in this case is the Greenbelt, surrounding land and the relationship of the site to public viewpoints. So evaluation, again, determination in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and each application being treated on its merits. So in this case, the basis for decision would be whether the proposal complies with policy on the Greenbelt and also the impact on trees, visual amenity and the character of the area. And overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan, or are there material considerations that would indicate a decision otherwise? So thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Any further questions for Ms. Green? Councillor Van Sweden. No. Councillor Clark? No. Yeah, in the report it says that if the curtilage was increased, there could be an increase in permitted development. I just wondered if you could have a little comment on what kind of permitted development that would be, because I appreciate that permitted development within an urban area might be one thing, but within a green belt it might have more of an impact.
Yes, I mean, there are permitted development rights that relate to residential curtilages that wouldn't relate otherwise in the Greenbelt. But as the applicant's agent says, a lot of those are because most of the areas in front of the house, a lot of those wouldn't apply. There would be some things that they could do, such as hard surfacing and low boundary treatments. I think those are the only two categories that, well, probably engineering works within the area as well. So there are some that would apply, although sort of building structures, because it's in front of the house, wouldn't.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Thank you for clearing that up. The Rhodes haven't made a comment on. Is there a comment by Rhodes about whether this new access is actually required? Because and I just wonder if you could confirm whether the road that extends up, I believe it's blocked off, so there would be no the chances of other traffic using it would be fairly minimal. Is that the case?
Yes, it is blocked off, and roads haven't objected. I think there was an adjustment to the position of the access, but the applicant's agent is saying that it's in order to make turns into the site more easier because access is only now from the south. But there's no requirement from our roads consultee for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Green. And just going back to the design of the new garage, what would we expect within the Greenbelt for the design of a garage? We'd be looking for something with regards to gable roofs, or something just more acceptable and in keeping with perhaps surrounding buildings and being more appropriate in the Greenbelt area?
Yes, I mean, on one hand, the flat roof garage makes it less conspicuous, but the previous permission that was granted was for quite a shallow pitched roof on the garage. So, and I think the garage was also built in timber rather than a render. So some, obviously that was considered acceptable in 2019. The different material and the pitched roof.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies something. Are there any other further questions on the back of that? Councillor Clark? No. Councillor Van Sweden?
Yeah, this is quite a substantial road, isn't it? Are we talking about a road that would take two cars going either way on each side?
I can look on Street View. I mean, I'm not sure that it's quite a substantial road, but whether two cars can pass, I would have
Single
to.
track?
Just a moment. I'll just share the screen and look on Drive Along Street View. Yep, so this is the road. The house on the left.
Yes, sorry, within the development.
Oh, I
on
see.
there,
Sorry, the driveway itself.
Yes, yes.
I mean,
This-
it's a driveway that would be.
And it would all, the proposal is for it all to be tarmacked or just part of it?
The proposal is for stone chippings on most of the length of the driveway and then just tarmac in the first 5 meters. That's because the roads team wouldn't want loose chippings to go onto the road.
Main road. Okay. My understanding also from the proposal and the refusal is that this development would also change the policy. How would you describe that? Governance over that area once it had been done. Is that correct?
It would, well, it would change the use to part of the residential curtilage, thereby meaning that any permitted development rights that applied to residential properties would apply. Is that what you mean?
Would it create a situation where more development would become easier?
Well, you'd need planning permission for most other development other than quite minor works. So that would be controlled by the planning authority still.
Okay, so would it change the nature of the policies? So would you move from example NE1 to H1?
No, it would still be judged in terms of any future application would still be judged in terms of the Greenbelt policy. So if somebody wanted to build another house there, it would still be looking at the Greenbelt policy. It wouldn't be rezoned in terms of the local development plan. It would remain in the Greenbelt.
Okay, Ms. Green, thank you.
Sorry, I'm sun suddenly come through my window and I'm struggling to actually see the screen here. Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. Any further questions for Ms. Green? No. Thank you. I'll be upholding the officer's recommendations. I'm always very wary about development within the Greenbelt site, and I'm not convinced that the location for this is. I think it could be detrimental to the Greenbelt and policy. NE2. It's. I'm not convinced that the new road is actually needed for safety reasons, as was stated. I would be happy if in the future they came forward to amend the entrance, and as the road is no longer used, I think I'm not quite sure of the need for the extending of the road, and it's my understanding that that's the reason for the extending of the curtilage. I just think it's unnecessarily development within the Greenbelt. I'm also concerned with the design under policy D1 of the garage. I think what was there or what got planning permission before was more suitable under D1, where it actually fitted more within the Greenbelt and the policy NE2. I'm very reluctant to lose any trees, no matter what the condition of them. So I'm concerned about the policy under NE 5. So I will be upholding the officer's recommendation as it's. I think it's leading to slight overdevelopment within a Greenbelt site, which I don't feel is particularly necessary at the moment. So I will be upholding it under overdevelopment or permitted development within the Greenbelt site. Councillor Clark, could you please state your reason in respect of the application and state for the minutes the grounds for that reason, referring to planning policy where
I wish to uphold the decision under the grounds of D1, the design of the garage, which I feel is inconclusive for the area, and of course it does state in the application it's not of the highest quality. And also in NE5, the removal of trees. I have a great concern for the area. It is a greenbelt area after all. I know I've gone into the thing where they said that the plant life, where you showed the gauge of the lifespans of the trees, etc., but it is still a greenbelt area, and I feel that the extension of the road inside is not required because there's not an actual difference to the size of the house, it's the size of the garage, and I am upholding it under NE5 and D1.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Van Sweden, could you please state your decision in respect of the application and state for the minute the grounds for that decision, referring to planning policy where appropriate?
Yes, convener. Yes, I would uphold the officer's decision on this case as well. I find with policy NE2 that the development it's not small scale. It's intense in activity in comparison to what I think should be there. Yes, again, trees, the loss of trees, I think is something that concerns me. Really, I would really just reiterate what you said, convener, about this. I don't think I can say anything more than that.
Thank you, Councillor Van Sweden. Therefore, the local body has therefore agreed to unanimously uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Please note that the decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Once again, thank you, Ms. Green, for your input, and Councillors Van Sweden and Councillor Clark and Lindsay McBain. Thank you. And at that point, I call the meeting to a close.
Thank you. I'll just stop the recording.